Hi, welcome to another episode of How to Do Atkins Low Carb. My name is, of course, Kent Altena, and today's episode will have to deal with more of a psychological rather than a physical aspect of losing weight, and why potentially that one might not want to lose weight in the first place, and how to overcome these psychological barriers or self-sabotaging behaviors that might occur from time to time. And one of those reasons occurs because people have always treated their fat as an insulator. It insulates you from the outside world, from having certain feelings, from certain things. I'd like to quote one of the blog posts out there for someone who's talking about exactly what I'm discussing here. I like being fat because it's easier to blame everything on my weight than it is to take responsibility and face up to my emotions. You know the sort of thinking I mean. Oh, I'd so much more rather be thin, but if only I weren't fat. If everything was so much blank, if I could just lose weight. I'm here to tell you I lost a lot of weight and nothing changed. Well, it was easier to buy clothes, but I was still me with all my emotional denial in an albeit thinner body. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting miracles, but what I hadn't counted on was how much I was using my fat as a literally insulation from the world around me. It was protecting me from having to take responsibility for my feelings. When I lost that weight, the protection was gone. I was literally naked in this world. And that woman got into kind of what I seemingly saw when I was morbidly obese. I could literally be insulated from the outside world, both figuratively and literally. Figuratively, there were certain things that you just did not have to worry about as a morbidly obese guy. You didn't have to worry about being faithful to your wife because there was no one out there who was going to be, there was no woman out there looking for a morbidly obese guy. There was also the feelings that, you know, if I'm overweight, one cannot necessarily blame me for my inadequacy. You can't blame me for being a bad father. I'm just fat. You can't blame me for not going on running or exercising. I'm just fat. You can't blame me for take your pick because I'm just fat. There's also the insulation factor in the fact that you didn't have to potentially face some of your other issues because you had this more important issue that you wanted to deal with, i.e. your morbid obesity. You could put certain other things on the shelf and just tuck them behind, whether that be marital or friendship issues, because you were dealing with something more important. There's also such things as called fatitudes. There's the self-sabotage and reasons that people have kept themselves fat. I'd also kind of like to go over some of the reasons I've seen other people self-sabotage themselves and to keep themselves fat and not to lose the weight. They don't want to deal with potentially friendship issues. Maybe you've surrounded yourself with overweight friends and you don't want to potentially lose them in your mind over the fact that you might have lost weight, or that they might be then jealous of you that you did something that they could not do. Some other reasons is that people may have higher expectations of you. I kind of dealt with this in terms of the insulation factor. They may have higher expectations of you in potentially your job, relationships, or your marital situation if you're lost the weight. Suddenly you're not seen as a failure, you're seen as just a normal person. Unfortunately, you lose your disability of being fat and thereby are expected to do more. You can't use your fat as being an excuse why you're not doing something. Other self-sabotaging reasons is you feel you're not worthy of being thin anymore, or you're unhappy and you feel undeserving of being that thinner you. And finally, it's that feel of being a failure again. Feeling of attempting to lose the weight and then not succeeding this time. Well, you wrap all those things together and you come across with a mighty powerful reason some people never attempt to actually lose the weight for real. They say they might be trying to lose the weight, but they end up quitting or falling away after the first 1 or 2 weeks, or after a month. They make it a month or two, they don't see the success they do, or worse, they do see the success but have a plateau for 2 weeks and then come crashing down with doubt and the self-sabotaging feelings once again. So again, fat's been insulating us and preventing some of these true relationships from burgeoning with one another, what happens when we do in fact lose the weight? What happens when the morbidly obese do in fact lose the weight? What are those impacts with other people? What happens with those friendships that you've developed? Well, sometimes you indeed have those friendships that don't survive the weight loss. Those friends that do indeed resent that you lost the weight, that they can't handle you as a thinner self. Conversely, you indeed might be treating your fat friends differently. You might be seeing them in a different light. Well, if I could do this, why can't you? Forgetting, of course, what your feelings were all along while you were the once overweight person. You suddenly put demands upon them that they tag along with you to gym class, for instance, or don't understand why they can't do the things that you're doing. So it's a two-way street. It's their relationship to you may indeed change, and the fact that they now no longer see you as a friend that you once were because you can't share in those fat feelings or the emotions that in dealing with their weight issues any longer. And two, you might be seeing them in a different manner or treating them differently or judging them differently than you had before. In fact, there may be even some physical reasons for this differing behavior after you indeed lose the weight. One of those fat-soluble hormones that run through your body that get released as you indeed lose the weight is testosterone. And as anyone knows, that testosterone was discovered to be directly or indirectly related to one's libido and one's social relationships with other people. In fact, in 1998, Quebec researchers discovered that 76 men who saw considerable weight loss saw their testosterone levels increase after following the weight loss. That indeed led to, in another study that was published under the title Partnership, Sexuality, Sexual Disorders in Morbidly Obese Women and the Consequence of Weight Loss After Gastric Banding, they saw that a considerable number of these people enjoyed their sex life more compared to preoperatively, as well as had a better self-image of themselves and had better self-confidence with themselves. So that many of their former negative behaviors that were led with emotional eating simply fell away, such as binge eating. In a third study, published under the name Surgery for Obesity and Marriage Quality, demonstrated that before weight loss surgery, most of the 54 morbidly obese patients considered their marriage to be good, although marked problems were higher than the comparison group of non-morbidly obese. 1 year later, a majority still rated their marriages as good, and many even reported better relationships with their spouses. Sexual function was enhanced. 3 years postoperatively, the incidence of marital happiness had risen to even the level of the comparison group, and the sexual functioning continued to improve. However, in this 3 years postoperative visit, the divorce rate was somewhat higher than the comparative group. So, like I said, the problems of weight loss may indeed solve a lot of things. However, it also may carry with it a number of different, perhaps unintended consequences. A fourth study indeed also proved that divorce rate in those people who had been morbidly obese and lost their weight was higher than the norm group. Why may those things happen? Perhaps for years one might have thought that one couldn't have a better spouse than they currently have today, or two, their spouse may indeed be treating them differently. In some cases, it might not be a bad thing if they were with an abusive spouse and finally deemed themselves worthy enough, or potentially it put them into a position in which they were experiencing feelings that they no longer had the capabilities of handling. So it's a matter of, if you indeed are going to lose weight, be aware that there may be other feelings and other things that are happening that you need to make yourself accounted for. Just as I've talked to you about cravings and how to deal with cravings, there may be unintended feelings that you may have to deal with afterwards. I can deal with that on a personal relationship. There's many years that I did not trust myself to be thin. I, in retrospect, subconsciously sabotaged previous weight loss behaviors because I didn't trust myself. Going forward, though, I realized that, you know what, I'm relatively the same person. I still have the same moral set that I had while I was heavyweight, and that it's a matter of understanding what your body's going through and dealing with it in a conscious sort. That the certain behaviors that you would have seen as abhorrent before are abhorrent afterwards. And do not let yourself just get taken over by certain hormones that may be running through your body. Weight loss, it's good, and it can have some negative and unintended consequences. It certainly improves a lot of things in your life. And it can certainly improve relationships, marital relationships that might have been strained before. Certain things that might have been difficult before may have required medications before to get certain functional capabilities, if you know what I mean. May no longer be the case. But, like I said, you got to be aware of the good, both sides of the coin. Make sure that the guy that you want to be, or the woman that you want to be before, is the guy that you want to be after the weight loss. The person that you were before, stay true to yourself, stay true to your inner being, and I think you'll stay okay. Well, that concludes another episode of How to Do Atkins Low Carb. I want you to thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comment section below. I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you.